17 different species had gathered at Docking Bay 9 to laugh at the ugliest ship they had ever seen. The vessel looked like someone had welded together pieces of scrap metal, hammered them flat, and called it space-worthy. Rust-colored patches covered its hull. Thick rivets lined every seam. The name painted on its side read "Rusty Nail" in faded white letters that were peeling at the edges. "What is that thing made of?" asked a Velthrani trader, his insect-like eyes blinking in disbelief. His own ship gleamed nearby, its crystalline hull catching light like a diamond. "Iron and steel," answered his companion, a tall Korath with blue-green scales. "The humans still use metals they dig from the ground. Can you imagine?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. On Meridian 7, the largest trade station in this sector of space, such primitive technology was entertainment. Every civilized species had moved beyond crude metallurgy thousands of years ago. Crystal composites, energy matrices, exotic alloys grown in zero gravity. These were the materials of modern starships. Human metal belonged in museums. Diana Reyes walked down her ship's cargo ramp and ignored every single laugh. At 45 years old, she had heard it all before. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands were rough from decades of actual work. Behind her, 4 crew members began unloading crates of supplies. "Captain Reyes," called out a voice dripping with amusement. Diana turned to see a Velthrani approaching. He was taller than most of his species, and his chitinous shell had been polished to a gleaming finish. Ambassador Churix, according to his diplomatic sash. "Ambassador," Diana replied flatly. "I simply had to see for myself." Churix gestured at the rusty nail with one of his 4 arms. "Is this truly your vessel? I thought perhaps it was a garbage barge that had drifted into the wrong bay." More laughter from the crowd. Diana's chief engineer, a barrel-chested man named Petros, stepped forward with clenched fists. Diana stopped him with a look. "She gets the job done," Diana said simply. "Job done?" Churix's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. "My dear Captain, my personal yacht is made of Velthrani crystal composite. It can withstand direct plasma bombardment. Your ship looks like it would collapse if someone sneezed on it." "Different tools for different jobs," Diana said. She had long ago learned that arguing with aliens about human technology was pointless. They would believe what they wanted to believe. Churix leaned closer, his compound eyes studying her face. "Tell me honestly, do humans actually still dig rocks from the ground and heat them with fire, like ancestors, like primitives?" "Every day," Diana said without shame. "We heat them very hot, hit them very hard, and shape them into whatever we need." The crowd erupted in fresh laughter. Diana simply shrugged and returned to supervising her cargo. Let them laugh. The rusty nail had been flying for 30 years and had never failed her. Petros fell into step beside her. "Why do you let them talk to you like that, Captain?" "Because words don't damage hull plating," Diana replied, "and we have work to do." The next 3 hours passed in routine labor. Human cargo, machine parts, agricultural equipment, preserved foods moved from the rusty nail into station storage. These were items that other species found quaint but occasionally useful. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 2 decades, and they were still seen as the newcomers. The primitives who had somehow stumbled into space with their crude rockets and cruder materials. Diana was reviewing inventory numbers when every alarm on the station screamed to life at once. Red lights flooded the docking bay. Aliens began running in every direction, their earlier amusement replaced by pure terror. Diana grabbed a passing Korath worker. "What's happening?" "Carveth," the worker shouted, pulling free. "Carveth fleet, they found us." Diana had heard of the Carveth Dominion, a conquering species from the far side of the galaxy. Ruthless, technologically advanced, supposedly hundreds of light years away. Supposedly. The station shook as something massive struck its outer shields. Through the transparent ceiling of the docking bay, Diana could see flashes of weapons fire lighting up the void. Sleek Carveth warships, their hulls made of some dark crystalline material, were pouring weapons fire at Meridian 7. And the station's defenses were failing. Diana watched in horror as energy shields flickered and died. She watched as the crystalline hull of a nearby Velthrani yacht began to crack and splinter under the Karvath assault. The enemy weapons seemed specifically designed to target crystalline materials, creating resonance frequencies that shattered them from within. Beautiful ships worth millions, were crumbling like glass sculptures hit with hammers. "Everyone back on board," Diana shouted to her crew. "Now." They ran for the rusty nail as the station descended into chaos around them. Crystalline walls were cracking. Energy conduits were exploding. Every advanced material on the station was failing at once. Diana reached her ship and slammed the boarding ramp controls. Petros was already running for the engine room. "Get us powered up," Diana ordered. "Full defensive posture." "Captain," said her pilot, a young woman named Rosa, "what are we supposed to do? Our weapons can barely scratch those ships." "Just get our systems online, all of them." Through the view screen, Diana watched a Karvath weapon blast strike a Korath cruiser. The ship's exotic alloy hull resonated, vibrated, and then shattered into a million glittering pieces. Then a stray blast hit the rusty nail. Diana braced for destruction. It never came. The ship shuddered, metal groaned. Somewhere in the hull, a plate dented inward by nearly an inch. But nothing shattered, nothing cracked, nothing failed. Rosa stared at her console in disbelief. "Captain, we're fine, hull integrity at 97%. Diana looked at her hands, calloused hands that had shaped steel, welded iron, hammered metal into form. Hands that worked with materials the galaxy had dismissed as primitive garbage. "Petros," she said into the comm, "how fast can you get me a channel to station command?" 2 minutes, why? Diana watched another crystalline ship crumble outside her window, while her ugly, rusty, supposedly worthless ship sat untouched. "Because I think I know how to save this station." The communication screen flickered twice before a face appeared. Commander Veles of Station Meridian 7 was a Korath, her scales normally a calm blue-green. Right now they had shifted to pale gray, the color of fear among her species. "Who is this?" Veles demanded. "I have no time for—" "Captain Diana Reyes of the human freighter Rusty Nail," Diana interrupted. "Commander, your station is dying because Karvath weapons are designed to destroy crystalline materials. Every advanced alloy, every exotic composite, every energy matrix on this station resonates at frequencies their weapons can target." "I am aware of our situation, human." Veles's voice was sharp with desperation. "Our shields are gone, our hull is cracking. What could you possibly—" "My ship is made of steel." Veles paused. "Steel, that primitive. That primitive metal just took a direct hit from Karvath weapons and barely dented. Steel doesn't resonate. It doesn't shatter. It bends, it dents, it absorbs energy instead of cracking apart." On the screen, Diana could see explosions behind Veles. Sparks rained down from damaged systems. The station was falling apart around her. "What are you proposing?" Veles asked. "I have a cargo hold full of raw iron ore and steel ingots. Most stations consider it worthless junk. But if we can get to your manufacturing facilities, we can forge barriers, reinforce critical areas, maybe even make weapons that actually work against Karvath armor." "Human metallurgy," Veles said slowly. "You want to save my station with rocks and fire. I want to save 10,000 lives with whatever works." The station shook again. Somewhere nearby, a wall collapsed with a crystalline crash. "Manufacturing Base 7, Veles said finally. "I will clear you a path, bring everything you have." Diana cut the channel and turned to her crew. "You heard her. Petros, I need every ingot, every ore sample, every piece of spare metal we have. Rosa, get us as close to Base 7 as possible. We're going to need to move fast." Getting through the station was a nightmare. Corridors that had been pristine hours ago were now filled with debris and fleeing civilians. Crystal walls had fractured into deadly shards. Bodies lay where they had fallen, mostly aliens whose species Diana had never learned the names of. Her crew pushed cargo loaders through the chaos, each one piled high with metal that had been laughed at just hours before. They reached Manufacturing Bay 7 to find it already crowded with refugees. Engineers, technicians, workers from a dozen different species, all of them covered in dust and fear. They stared at the humans and their cargo with obvious confusion. "What is that supposed to be?" asked a Velthrani engineer, gesturing at a stack of steel ingots. "Your salvation if you're willing to learn," Diana replied. She turned to Petros. "Get the forges hot. Show anyone willing to learn the basics. We need plates, barriers, anything we can use to reinforce the central hub." Petros nodded and began shouting orders. Within minutes the bay transformed. Forges that had sat unused for decades, kept only for historical demonstrations, roared to life. The smell of heating metal filled the air. "I do not understand," said a voice beside Diana. She turned to find Ambassador Churix standing there. His polished shell was now cracked and covered in dust. One of his four arms hung limp at his side, clearly broken. His earlier arrogance had completely disappeared. "What part?" Diana asked. "All of it. This is primitive technology. How can it possibly help against the Karvath?" Diana picked up a steel bar from a nearby crate. She held it in front of Churix's compound eyes. "Your crystalline composites are strong," she said. "They can take tremendous force, but they're brittle. When they fail, they shatter completely. This metal is different. It's not as strong, but it bends, it dents, it deforms. And most importantly, it doesn't resonate at the frequencies Karvath weapons use." "But it is so crude," Churix said weakly. "Crude kept my ship intact while yours crumbled." Diana handed him the steel bar. "You can help us or you can stand there judging, your choice." Churix looked at the bar in his hands. For a long moment, Diana thought he would drop it and walk away. Instead, he tightened his remaining good hands around it. "Show me what to do." Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. Aliens who had never touched raw metal in their lives learned to work it. Velthrani engineers, used to growing crystals in precise patterns, discovered the brutal satisfaction of hammering hot steel into shape. Korath technicians, accustomed to elegant energy manipulation, found themselves welding crude plates together. The work was hard, dirty, and nothing like what any of them were trained for. They burned themselves. They hit their fingers. They cursed in a dozen different languages. But slowly, steel barriers began to pile up. Crude weapons, clubs, axes, shields took shape under Petros' guidance. "Why do you do it this way?" asked a young Korath who was watching Petros hammer a red-hot piece of iron. "Why not use machines?" "Machines are good," Petros admitted, his hammer rising and falling in steady rhythm. "But my people learned that you cannot always trust machines. Sometimes the power fails. Sometimes the computers break. When that happens, you still need to make things, so we learn to use our hands." "Your species is very strange," the Korath said. "We prefer the word stubborn." A boom echoed through the station, closer this time. Diana looked up from her work. "Organizing the finished barriers." "How much time do we have?" she asked into her communicator. Velis's voice came back, strained with exhaustion. "Karvath boarding parties have breached the outer sections. They are cutting through our defenses like they are not even there. Their plasma cutters slice through crystal like water through sand." "How long until they reach Central Hub?" "At their current speed, perhaps 1 hour." Diana looked at the pile of steel they had forged. Then she looked at the corridor leading to Central Hub, where 10,000 civilians waited. "We need to reinforce that corridor," she said. "Now." "It will never hold," Churix said. "That corridor is 200 meters long. We do not have enough steel to." "We don't need to block the whole corridor." Diana picked up a steel plate and examined it. "We just need to build one door they can't break, one choke point." Petros looked up from his forge, understanding dawning on his soot-covered face. "You want to make them come to us." "Exactly. One door. One point of defense." Let them waste their fancy weapons trying to break through human metal while we prepare a welcome party behind it. Churix stared at her. You are betting 10,000 lives on a single door made of primitive metal. Diana met his compound eyes without flinching. I'm betting on 4 billion years of human stubbornness. That's what made this metal. That's what made us. And that's what's going to save your station. The screams were getting closer. Somewhere in the outer corridors, Carveth soldiers were cutting through the station like surgeons cutting through flesh. Their crystalline armor deflected every weapon the station's security forces threw at them. Their plasma cutters sliced through walls, doors, and barricades without slowing. Diana worked faster. The corridor leading to Central Hub was 200 meters long and 3 meters wide. At its entrance, Diana's team was building something that had never existed on a galactic station before, a proper steel blast door. 12 centimeters of solid steel, welded to a steel frame, anchored into the walls with steel bolts as thick as a human arm. It was ugly. It was crude. It looked like something from an ancient Earth fortress rather than a modern space station. It was also their only hope. 20 minutes until the Carveth reached this section, Veles reported through the comm. Perhaps less. Diana wiped sweat from her forehead and examined their work. The door was almost complete. Behind it, stretching down the corridor, steel barriers created a series of fallback positions. If the enemy broke through the door, the defenders would retreat to the next barrier, then the next, buying time with each step. What about weapons? Diana asked Petros. Her engineer gestured to a pile of newly forged objects, steel pipes with weighted ends, axes made from sharpened metal plates welded to steel handles, crossbows, actual crossbows, firing bolts made of hardened iron. Every energy weapon we have is useless against Carveth crystalline armor, Petros explained. But these are different. Steel doesn't care about energy reflection. It just punches through whatever is in front of it. An elderly Korath scholar named Melith had been watching them work for the past hour. She was too old and frail to help with the forging, but her eyes were sharp with fascination. I have studied 1,000 civilizations, Melith said quietly. All of them abandoned primitive metals as soon as they discovered better materials. Your species discovered better materials too, but you kept the old ways. Diana accepted a steel pipe from Petros and tested its weight. On Earth, we have a saying, never throw away something that works. But surely crystal composites work better. Better for what? Diana pointed at a crack running down a nearby wall, a wall made of station standard crystalline composite. Better for shrugging off minor impacts, sure. Better for looking pretty. But your materials are designed for normal conditions. They expect energy shields to take the heavy hits. They expect weapons to be the same energy-based systems everyone uses. She swung the pipe experimentally. The Carveth designed weapons that specifically break those assumptions, but they never planned for this. Why would they? Nobody uses this anymore. Except humans, Melith said. Except humans. The door was finished with 10 minutes to spare. Diana gathered everyone who was willing to fight. A strange group of humans, Velthrani, Korath, and a handful of other species she could not name. 43 defenders in total. Each one carried crude steel weapons that looked laughable compared to the elegant crystalline blades and energy projectors they were used to. Behind them, stretching down the corridor and into Central Hub, 10,000 civilians waited. Families, children. Elderly, the people who could not fight and had nowhere else to go. Diana stood at the front, facing the massive steel door. Listen to me, she said, her voice carrying in the silence. What comes through that door will be unlike anything you have trained for. The Carveth are fast, they're strong, and their armor laughs at your normal weapons, but not these weapons. She held up her steel pipe. This is just iron and carbon, nothing fancy, nothing elegant, but it will punch through crystalline armor because crystalline armor was never designed to stop it. When they come through that door, you hit them. Hard. You don't stop hitting them until they stop moving. And if the door does not hold, someone asked. It will hold. How can you be certain? Diana smiled grimly. Because I've spent my whole life around human metal, and human metal is too stubborn to break when you need it most. Silence fell over the corridor. In the distance, they could hear explosions, screams, the methodical cutting sound of plasma weapons slicing through whatever stood in the Carveth's way. Then the sound stopped. Heavy footsteps echoed from somewhere beyond the door. Many footsteps, moving in perfect unison. Diana gripped her pipe tighter. Here they come. The first plasma cutter touched the door and the steel screamed, but it did not shatter. The superheated beam carved into the metal, melting a glowing line across its surface, but the steel merely absorbed the heat and spread it outward. The glowing line cooled from white to orange to dull red. Behind the door, the Carveth commander's voice echoed through the metal. Diana did not understand the language, but she understood the tone, confusion, frustration, the sound of someone encountering something that did not follow the rules. More plasma cutters joined the first. The door began to glow in multiple places. The air in the corridor grew hot. Sweat dripped down Diana's face. But the door held. They're trying something else, Petros reported, pressing his hand against the door frame. I can feel vibrations, sonic disruptor maybe. The door rang like a massive bell. The sound was deafening, but steel did not crack under sonic attack. It simply vibrated and then fell silent. Diana could almost feel the rage building on the other side. Then came an explosion that shook the entire corridor. The door buckled inward, its center pressing toward them like a giant fist had punched. Its welds cracked, bolts groaned. But the frame held. The door, twisted and deformed, remained in place. Through a gap at the top corner, where the door had pulled away from the frame, Diana could see movement, dark crystalline armor, glowing red eyes. They're coming through the gap, someone shouted. Diana stepped forward as the first Carveth soldier squeezed through the opening. He was tall, armored head to toe in beautiful black crystal, carrying an energy blade that hummed with deadly power. He looked at Diana's steel pipe and made a sound that might have been laughter. Diana swung anyway. The pipe connected with his helmet at full force. The crystalline armor, designed to deflect energy weapons with elegant efficiency, had no answer for simple kinetic impact. The helmet cracked. The Carveth soldier staggered. Diana hit him again and again. On the third swing, the helmet shattered completely. The soldier collapsed, and for a moment everything was silent. Then the defenders surged forward with a roar. Steel met crystal. Crude hammers and axes swung against elegant armor. The Carveth, confused and unprepared, fell back. Behind the twisted door, more soldiers were trying to force their way through. But the gap was narrow, and steel weapons waited on the other side. Diana stood over the fallen Carveth soldier, breathing hard, her pipe dripping with alien blood. "Primitive metal," she whispered. "Not so useless now, is it?" Commander Solvax of the Carveth Dominion had never failed a conquest. In 200 years of service, he had destroyed 17 civilizations and captured over 40 major installations. His name was spoken in terror across half the galaxy. Now he stood staring at a door made of garbage, and his soldiers were dying. "Report," he demanded through his communicator. "We cannot breach, Commander. The material does not respond to our weapons." "Impossible. Our plasma cutters slice through battleship armor." "This is not battleship armor, Commander. It is something else, something crude. It melts slowly instead of shattering. It bends instead of breaking. And the gap we created—" The soldier's voice cut off with a wet sound. Solvax watched through his tactical display as another of his warriors fell. They were being dragged through the gap one by one, pulled into a corridor full of enemies wielding simple metal clubs. This was humiliation. "Breach charge," Solvax ordered. "Maximum yield." "Destroy that door." "Commander, maximum yield might compromise the station's structure." "I do not care. Destroy it." Inside the corridor, Diana heard the Carveth pulling back. She knew what was coming. "Everyone behind the second barrier," she shouted. "Now move." The defenders scrambled back, dragging their wounded with them. They had barely reached the steel plates of the second barricade when the world turned white. The explosion was designed to destroy capital ship bulkheads, thick crystalline composite rated to withstand direct naval bombardment. When it struck the steel door, the results were spectacular. The door did not shatter. It could not shatter. Steel does not work that way. Instead, it melted. It warped. It tore free from its frame in twisted, glowing chunks. The shockwave threw debris down the corridor like shrapnel. When Diana's vision cleared, the door was gone. In its place was a ragged opening, smoke pouring through, edges still glowing cherry red. And through that opening came the Carveth. They poured in like a dark tide, their crystalline armor gleaming, their weapons raised. They expected the defenders to be dead or stunned. They expected an easy advance. They did not expect crossbow bolts. Diana's remaining archers, 6 of them, positioned behind steel shields, released their first volley. Iron bolts flew true, punching through crystalline chest plates that had never been designed to stop physical projectiles. 3 Carveth fell instantly. "Hold the line," Diana roared, raising her pipe. The next minutes were chaos. Steel met crystal in close combat. The corridor was too narrow for the Carveth to use their numbers, so they funneled in one by one, meeting defenders who had learned that crude weapons could crack elegant armor. A Velthrani engineer named Rick stood beside Diana, swinging a sledgehammer with 4 arms. Each blow sent a Carveth soldier staggering. Beside him, Petros fought with 2 steel axes, his arms like pistons. Churix, despite his broken arm, held a steel shield in his good hands, blocking blows meant for others. "How are they doing this?" A Carveth soldier screamed into his communicator before a steel bolt took him through the visor. Diana did not know how many she killed. She stopped counting after the first dozen. Her pipe was bent now, dented from impact after impact, but it still swung true. Slowly, impossibly, the Carveth advance stalled. Commander Solvex watched, his tactical display with growing disbelief. His forces were some of the finest soldiers in the Dominion. They had conquered species with technology far beyond these primitives, and yet they were being pushed back by creatures wielding metal clubs. "What are these humans?" he demanded. His tactical officer pulled up information. "Species, human, homeworld, Earth, technological classification, pre-crystalline. They still use chemical rockets and metal construction. Galactic standing, minimal, considered a primitive curiosity." "Primitive," Solvax repeated. "They are killing my soldiers with rocks and sticks, and you call them primitive." He studied the display more carefully. The human metal, this crude iron and steel, did not appear in any of their tactical databases. Why would it? Nobody used such materials anymore. Their weapons had been designed to fight advanced civilizations, not cave dwellers. "All units fall back," Solvex ordered. "Commanders, we cannot win this battle with current weapons. We need a new approach." Inside the corridor, Diana watched the Carveth retreat through the smoking hole where the door had been. Bodies littered the ground, mostly Carveth, their elegant armor cracked and broken. The defenders were not unharmed. 8 had fallen, 12 more were wounded, but they were alive. The line had held. "They're pulling back," Petros said, disbelief in his voice. "They're actually pulling back." Diana leaned against the wall, exhausted beyond words. Her arms ached. Her hands were blistered from gripping the pipe. She was covered in alien blood and human sweat. "They'll be back," she said. "They're just regrouping." "Let them." Churix stepped forward, his polished shell now completely ruined, covered in dents and scratches. "We held. Against the Carveth Dominion we held." "This isn't over," Diana warned. As if in answer, Commander Velis's voice came through the comm, strained with new fear. "Captain Reyes, the Carveth fleet is charging their main weapons. They are targeting the station directly." Diana felt her stomach drop. "They can't. There are 10,000 people here." "They do not care. If they cannot conquer us, they will destroy us." We have perhaps 30 minutes before their weapons are fully charged. Diana looked around at her exhausted defenders. They had won an impossible victory against boarding parties, but there was nothing they could do against orbital bombardment. There. Steel barriers, their crude weapons, their stubborn human determination. None of it would matter against weapons designed to crack planets. Unless... Diana's eyes fell on the destroyed doorway. Beyond it, the docking bay was visible, and in that docking bay, battered but intact, sat the rusty nail. "Veles," Diana said slowly, "how close can you get me to the Carveth flagship?" "Captain, my ship survived their weapons once. What if I could get it close enough to board?" Silence on the channel. "Then that is suicide." "Probably." Diana straightened up, ignoring the pain in every muscle. "But if we're going to die anyway, I'd rather die doing something about it." She turned to face her crew. "I need volunteers. I'm taking the rusty nail straight at the Carveth fleet. Anyone who wants to come with me, grab a weapon and meet me at the ship." Petros stepped forward without hesitation. Then Rosa, her pilot. Then, to Diana's surprise, Churix. "I mocked your ship," the ambassador said. "I mocked your metal. I was wrong. Allow me to make amends." Diana looked at the alien who had laughed at her just hours ago. Now he stood ready to die beside her. "Welcome aboard," she said. The rusty nail launched from Meridian 7 like a bullet fired from a gun. Behind them, the station burned. Ahead of them, 16 Carveth warships hung in the void, their weapons charging with enough power to reduce the station to atoms. And in the middle of it all, one ugly human freighter flew straight toward the enemy flagship. "They're targeting us," Rosa reported from the pilot's seat. "Multiple locks. They think we're trying to run." "Let them think that." Diana gripped the arms of her captain's chair. "Hold course straight at the flagship." The first shots came seconds later. Blue-white beams of energy designed to shatter crystalline hulls swept across the rusty nail's path. The ship shuddered as glancing blows struck its steel plating. Warning lights flashed. "Hull temperature rising," Petros called from engineering. "But we're holding. The metal is conducting heat away from critical systems." More shots, direct hits this time. The ship rang like a bell, its hull glowing red in places. Somewhere in the cargo hold, emergency seals engaged as minor breaches appeared. But the rusty nail kept flying. "They cannot believe we are still coming," Churix said, watching the tactical display with his compound eyes. "Their weapons have destroyed 100 ships today. Why does ours survive?" "Because their weapons expect targets that fight back the same way," Diana explained. "Crystal reflects energy. Our steel absorbs it. They're not destroying us. They're just making us angry." The flagship grew larger in the view screen. It was a massive thing, easily a kilometer long, its dark crystalline hull covered in weapon arrays and sensor spines. Beautiful and deadly and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "Collision course locked," Rosa said. 20 seconds to impact." "All hands brace for impact." Petros reinforced the bow plating. "Already done, Captain. I welded an extra 6 centimeters to the nose. If we're going to punch through that ship, we're going to do it properly." The rusty nail hit the Carveth flagship at full speed. The crystalline hull, elegant and sophisticated, had been designed to withstand energy weapons, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic missiles. It had not been designed to stop a solid steel battering ram. The rusty nail punched through the outer hull like a fist through glass. Crystalline shards exploded outward. Emergency bulkheads tried to close but shattered against the human ship's reinforced bow. Corridors collapsed. Systems failed. And then the rusty nail was inside. Diana was thrown against her restraints as the ship ground to a halt, buried deep in the Carveth flagship's guts. Smoke filled the bridge. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. But the view screen still worked, and through it she could see the interior of an alien warship. "Everyone alive," Diana called out. Confirmations came from her crew, battered, bruised, but alive. "Then grab your weapons. We're going hunting." They poured out of the rusty nail through emergency exits, steel weapons in hand. The Carveth were already responding, soldiers rushing toward the breach from all directions. But the corridors near the impact point were damaged, crystalline walls cracked and unstable. And the defenders had steel. Diana led the charge down the main corridor toward the bridge. Churix fought beside her, his 3 working arms wielding a steel club with devastating effect. Petros came behind with his twin axes, cutting down anyone who tried to flank them. Rosa and the other crew members formed a solid line, pushing forward step by bloody step. Carveth soldiers fell, their crystalline armor already stressed by the impact shock cracked under steel blows there. Energy weapons, designed for elegant duels at range, were useless in the tight corridors where humans fought up close. "The bridge is ahead," Churix reported. "I recognize the architecture 50 meters." "Then we push." They pushed. Diana lost track of how many Carveth she killed. Her arms burned with exhaustion. Her pipe was now so bent it was almost useless, so she had switched to a steel blade taken from a fallen crew member. The bridge doors were sealed, massive crystalline slabs designed to withstand any assault. "Petros," Diana said, "can you get through?" Her engineer examined the doors, then he smiled. "These are just crystal, and crystal has weak points." He pulled a steel spike from his belt, something he had forged in the manufacturing bay, just in case, and drove it into the seam between the doors. Then he hit it with his hammer. The crystal cracked. He hit it again and again. Each blow drove the spike deeper, widening the crack. Carveth soldiers behind them were trying to regroup, but Rosa and the others held them back. With a final blow, the doors shattered. Commander Solvax stood on the bridge, surrounded by his command staff. He was tall, taller than any Carveth Diana had seen, and his crystalline blade was the color of deep space. "You," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, "the primitive humans." "That's us," Diana raised her steel blade. "Surrender your ship." Solvax laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. "You have fought well for animals, but you face me now. I have killed thousands in personal combat. Your crude weapons cannot." Diana did not let him finish. She charged. Solvax's crystalline blade swept toward her, fast and elegant. Diana blocked with her steel blade. The crystal shattered. Solvax stared at the broken hilt in his hand for one shocked moment. Then Diana's blade found his throat. The commander fell, and silence swept across the bridge. Diana stood over the body, breathing hard. Around her, the surviving Carveth command staff stared in disbelief. "Order your fleet to stand down," Diana said. "Now, or I will assume command myself." One of the officers moved toward a console. A surrender signal began broadcasting to the Carveth fleet. But on the tactical display, Diana saw something that made her blood run cold. The other ships were not standing down. They were turning toward the flagship. "What are they doing?" Churix asked. "They are following protocol," the Carveth officer said quietly. "When a commander falls in combat against primitives, the evidence must be destroyed. They will fire upon us. They'll kill their own people. They will preserve Dominion honor." Diana watched the weapons on 16 ships begin to glow. In seconds, they would fire, destroying the flagship and everyone on it, including the Rusty Nail and her crew. "Petros," Diana said quickly, "the emergency beacon, can you boost it?" "Already on it, Captain." Petros worked frantically at a console, fingers flying across alien controls. Just as the Carveth fleet opened fire, a signal burst from the flagship at maximum power. A signal containing everything. Every sensor recording of the battle, every tactical log, every moment of the mighty Carveth Dominion being defeated by primitives with metal clubs. The first shot struck the flagship. Alarms screamed. The deck shook violently. Then the Carveth fleet stopped firing. "What happened?" Rosa asked. Diana looked at the tactical display. The signal had been received not just by the Carveth fleet, but by Dominion High Command itself. Somewhere far away, leaders were watching their undefeated warriors being humiliated. "They're withdrawing," she said, disbelief in her own voice. "They're running rather than let more evidence spread." One by one, the Carveth ships began jumping away. In minutes, the fleet was gone, leaving only the damaged flagship and the station it had tried to destroy. Diana sat down heavily in Solvax's command chair. "We did it," Petros said. "We actually did it." Diana looked at the steel blade in her hand. Simple metal, crude technology, the same materials humanity had used for thousands of years. "Yeah," she said quietly, "we did." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Meridian 7, and the galaxy had not stopped talking about it. Diana Reyes stood on the observation deck of her new ship, watching stars drift past. The vessel was called the Iron Promise, and it was 3 times the size of the Rusty Nail. Its hull gleamed with fresh steel plating, not the elegant crystal composites that other species preferred, but good honest metal forged in human factories. Behind her, a fleet of 30 ships held formation. Human ships, all of them, their steel hulls catching starlight like ancient armor. "Captain, incoming communication from Meridian 7, Rosa reported from her station. "Commander Veles sends her regards, says the memorial is complete." Diana nodded. On the station where thousands had almost died, a monument now stood. It was made of steel, scrap metal from the original battle, melted down and reforged into a sculpture of defenders standing together. Human and alien, side by side, holding crude weapons. The plaque beneath it read, "They called our metal primitive, our metal called them wrong." The observation deck door opened and Churix walked in. The Velthrani ambassador had changed in the past 6 months. His shell still bore the scars from the battle, and he refused to have them polished away. He wore a small steel pendant around his neck, a gift from Diana. "Captain Reyes," he said, "we are receiving requests from the consortium again. They want to know if humans can provide steel fortifications for 3 more stations." "Tell them we're working on it." Diana turned from the window. "How many species have asked for human engineering teams this week?" 47. The Korath Collective wants to hire Petros personally. The Velthrani Engineering Guild has offered honorary membership to any human who can teach them metallurgy. Diana smiled. It was strange how quickly things had changed. For 20 years, humans had been the joke of the galaxy. Now everyone wanted their primitive technology. The Carveth Dominion had withdrawn completely from this sector after the battle. Their undefeated reputation was destroyed, and without that reputation, their conquests elsewhere began to crumble. Species that had submitted out of fear now found courage. Rebellions erupted across Dominion space. All because of one ugly ship and a pile of steel ingots. Petros joined them on the observation deck, wiping grease from his hands. He had been promoted to chief engineer of the entire fleet, but he still spent most of his time in the engine room, hands-on as always. "The new forge is installed," he reported. "We can now produce steel plating and weapons in transit, no need to stop at stations." "Good, we might need it." The galaxy was not safe yet. The Carveth were wounded but not destroyed. Other predator species were watching, learning, adapting. Sooner or later, someone would figure out how to counter human metal. But by then, humans would have figured out something new. That was how they worked, not through elegant solutions or advanced technology, but through stubborn adaptation, through taking whatever worked and making it work better. A young, alien cadet approached Diana, a Korath barely out of training. She had joined the fleet after Meridian 7, determined to learn how humans fought. "Captain Reyes," the cadet said hesitantly, "may I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "What is human metal really made of? I have studied the chemistry. Iron and carbon trace elements, but there must be something more, some secret that gives it power." Diana reached into her pocket and pulled out a small steel bolt. She had been carrying it since Meridian 7, a simple fastener from the Rusty Nail's original hull. She placed it in the cadet's palm. "Feel that?" Diana said. Feel how heavy it is, how solid." The cadet examined the bolt. "I feel it, but I do not understand what makes it special." Diana leaned against the window, looking out at the stars. 4 billion years ago," she began, "our sun forged iron in its core. When stars like it die, they explode and scatter that iron across space. Some of it landed on our planet. It sank into Earth's heart and gave our world its magnetic field, the shield that protects us from radiation. For billions of years, that iron sat in the ground while life evolved above it. When our ancestors finally dug it up and learned to shape it with fire, they were touching something older than our species. Older than our planet, really. They were holding stardust in their hands." The cadet looked down at the bolt with new eyes. "But that still does not explain why it works," she said. "Why does this simple material defeat advanced weapons?" Diana smiled. "Because it's not just the material, it's what we did with it. For thousands of years, humans hammered metal, heated it, folded it, shaped it with nothing but muscle and determination. We built swords and plows and ships. We made mistakes and learned from them. Every piece of steel carries that history, that stubbornness." She pointed at the stars outside. "Your species grew crystals in perfect conditions. You designed computers to calculate optimal structures. Your materials are elegant because you made them that way, controlled, precise, perfect. But perfection is brittle. When something unexpected happens, perfection shatters." Diana took the bolt back from the cadet. "Human metal is not perfect. It bends, it dents, it rusts if you don't take care of it, but it never shatters completely. When you hit it, it absorbs the blow and keeps going. That's not chemistry, that's personality we made. Our metal's stubborn because we are stubborn. We made it tough because we had to be tough. We made it enduring because endurance is how we survived." She slipped the bolt back into her pocket. "So when you ask what human metal is really made of, it's not iron and carbon, it's patience, it's pressure. It's 4 billion years of stars and planets and ancestors who refuse to give up. That's the real human alloy." The cadet stood silent for a long moment. Then she straightened and offered a salute. "I think I understand now, Captain." "Good, now get back to your station. We have a sector to patrol." The cadet hurried away. Diana turned back to the window, where stars continued their ancient dance. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning, threats were gathering. The galaxy remained dangerous. But Diana was not worried. She had her fleet. She had her crew. And she had steel, simple, crude, primitive metal that had been laughed at by every sophisticated species in the galaxy. Until it saved them all. Churix stepped up beside her. "What are you thinking, Captain?" Diana touched the window, leaving a fingerprint on the glass. "I'm thinking about the next time someone mocks human technology." "And?" Diana smiled. "I'm thinking they'll learn the same lesson the Carveth learned, the same lesson the galaxy is still learning." "Which is?" "Never underestimate something just because it's simple. Never mock something just because it's old. And never, ever laugh at human metal." She turned and walked toward the bridge, leaving Churix alone with the stars and the quiet hum of a steel ship carrying humanity's answer to a galaxy that had doubted them. An answer forged in fire, hammered by determination, and harder than anyone had ever believed possible. Human metal. Primitive, crude, unbreakable.